Well, that is a nice copper coin, but oh, Doug, do you know what time it is?
45 up.
Who says 45 of, Doug? It's quarter after. What's up, guys? Quarter here, and welcome back to Quarter After. I had to take an impromptu last-minute cancellation of last week's show, so I do apologize. But I'm excited tonight. We're going to be talking pirates with a best-selling author, Eric Jay Dolin, who brings these old pirates and privateers to life. So I'm super excited to have him on. And believe it or not, this is a first for me. Charlie has something to do today. So does Rich. Lynn is traveling, and Doug's got some sort of a toothache. I'm running solo. It's me, Eric, and all of you guys. So hand me a little bit of extra grace today, because normally I have someone, usually Doug, that I can make some goofy jokes at, and he's not here today. But let me say a couple hellos while people are filtering in. I see Magic Mantix. I don't know. I can never read your name, and I apologize. Scott Cash from Missouri. How are you, brother? French Creek Detector. I see Crazy Diggin'. Billy Thompson, 4456, Corn Smoke, Gabriel Siegel, A.M. Collins, Clem Fandango. How are you, Clem? We were just up your way, Clem, not too long ago. Coils for Foils. Rich Van Winkle is here watching as he gets ready. You know, tomorrow's Halloween, as I don't have to tell all you guys. So Rich is preparing for a Halloween party that he's having at his house. So just a lot of stuff going on today. So before I jump into some of the show, I do want a couple of quick announcements I'm going to make. I wanted to make this last Thursday, but the show got, preemptively canceled. I'm sure if you don't know by now, fellow YouTuber and good friend of mine, Greg Pickens from Finding America, had passed away about maybe 10 days ago. Greg was an awesome, awesome dude. I've known him for years. We worked at Kelly Co together. Whenever one of us found something really cool, we would call or text each other. So super nice guy. If anyone in this whole hobby, I don't think anyone would say a bad thing about the guy. He was just a nice, nice dude. So I wanted to extend my sympathies to his family, and he will be missed. So Greg Pickens, Finding America. So I wanted to put that out there real fast. And before I forget, I don't want to forget, if anyone happens to live in the, where is she? The Berlin, Ohio area. Lynn's traveling because this weekend, Halloween weekend, she's got one of her shows, her antique shows, Simple Goods. It looks like it is in Berlin, Ohio. Don't forget, if you go out and see Lynn, you'll get a picture with her. We'll put the picture on the show. I think she gives you a signed picture, even though Lynn's not even in the picture. I think it's me and Doug. We're working on it. But make sure you go out. Lynn's got the oldest, coolest antiques, 1600s Pilgrim stuff. So make sure you go check that out. Simple Goods. It looks like it's in Berlin, Ohio. One day only, I see. Drove all the way out there for one day. But yeah, go show Lynn some love. Teresa, the treasure hunter, thank you very much. My moderator today. I appreciate everything Teresa does. Relic Cat is here. I had a game that I was going to play with Doug, and now Doug's not here. So I'm going to have to play the game with everybody out there. I don't know how it's going to work. But to try to get people psyched up for talking about pirates and privateers and all that stuff, I wanted to set the stage with some pirate talk. Oh, is Alicia here? I didn't see if Alicia was here or not. If she is, I'm sorry if I missed you. Jay Cook is here though. So here's what I was going to do, just to kind of get everybody ready. I'm going to put up what I think is a common pirate or early naval phrase, and you guys got to guess how it originated. Like, what did it mean back then? So for an example, here's one of the phrases. So if I put up, let the cat out of the bag. What I was going to ask Doug, he's not here. Doug, where do you think let the cat out of the bag came from? I didn't even know it was a pirate phrase until like yesterday. So, and I don't expect everyone to type in some crazy long definition, but think in your head out loud. And if you didn't even know, I will show you what it means. So let the cat out of the bag was indeed a pirate phrase. And originally it meant the cat was, as you can read, a cat of nine tails, which is like a whip that the captain or I guess it was another person on board would pull out if you were a crew member and you did something wrong, and he would, it would be a bad day for you. And in modern meaning, it kind of means like to spill a secret, but it originated like an old pirate, old maritime phrase, which I thought was pretty cool. And there's a bunch of them. So I'll show one more now, and then we'll talk amongst the chat for a second and see if anybody knows this one. This one I didn't even know. So let me say up, and I played it. So up, let me let me rewind. Okay, let's try this. Hold on. It's kind of no good if I give you the answer, huh? Shanghai. I never heard of Shanghai. If anyone out there, I mean, I've heard the term for Shanghai. I had no idea what it meant. Didn't know it was a pirate thing. Didn't know what it was. Anybody out there, raise your hand. Hold your hand up high if you knew what Shanghai meant, at least in the terms of pirates and old maritime stuff. Oh, I see some good answers in there. Magic Mantic says kidnapped Sue Ramsey. Oh, without Doug, look, I can do a lot of this today. Yes, a lot of people in there. Hopefully they didn't see the actual answer, but you're right. I guess it would be nice if I played it for you, huh? Shanghai didn't mean, I guess when pirates would land at some port, they would drug people or get them drunk, and they'd actually kidnap people and force them to work on the ship. Oftentimes they wouldn't even wake them up from the drugged stupor until they were out at sea, and then you're stuck there. So that's pretty crazy stuff. And so it does. It means getting tricked or roped into doing something that you didn't agree to. So Shanghai, which I thought was pretty cool. Didn't know that was a pirate term, but apparently some of you did. So excellent job. I'm not going to fool you guys. I know I would have fooled Doug. Doug had no idea what that stuff meant, but he's not here. Metal Bree Tectorist, how are you, Metal Bree? Andrew T, Eric Fairchild, Austin Bradley, Green Jeans is here. I'll do one more, and then I'll move on to the next little bit. How about this one? This was pretty interesting, I thought. Make sure I didn't mess this one up. The bitter end. Now, you've probably all heard that phrase, right? The bitter end. I didn't know it was maritime related. So I'll give a second if anybody wants to try to put your written guesses in what that means. Oh, man. Shiver me timbers. Shiver me timbers, when I looked that one up, NEPA, wasn't even actually a phrase. It was like a made up thing that we created like in the 1800s. And it didn't really have any sort of an actual pirate meaning that I could find. I do see some guesses, though. I see out of alcohol. No, good guess, though. I see bitters, a bad piece of meat. Oh, that was a good guess. The bitter end actually does mean, let me see if I can bring it up. You can see it here. The bitter was the last part of the rope, and it was tied to a metal post on the deck called bits with 2 T's. And when the rope got out and you couldn't extend it anymore, well, that was it. You were at the bitter end, where obviously in today's modern meaning, it means like you're reaching the end of a situation. So similar, just funny how some of these phrases started with, I don't want to necessarily say only pirates, but the nautical world. So if you got any of them right, congratulations. Relic Dog is here. What did you say, Relic Dog? Jack Handy quote about pirates. It's funny that pirates always went around searching for treasure and they never realized the real treasure was the fond memories they were creating along the way. What? Is that even a thing? I have so many questions for Eric. I don't know how I'm going to get to them because I know a little bit about pirates. I'm not going to say I know a lot about it. It's a fascinating subject. In my mind, pirates are like the biker gangs of the sea, like guys that like, if I lived back then, like you don't mess with the pirates. If you see them coming down the street, you kind of like, you don't want to make eye contact. But like, I'm curious, when they landed at these ports, they got to interact with the common folk, right? You got to go get water. You got to get supplies. You got to get bread. You got to talk to people. Did they just force themselves on? Like, were they bad the bone guys even in ports, or were they kind of friendly? And does the persona of the big bad pirate kind of stop or at least pause when you get off the ship and then it starts again? I don't know. I wasn't there. I just find it really interesting. And I'm also curious if they were celebrities like we think of them today in their lifetime. Most pirates, when I look them up, they didn't pirate very long, a few years, and then they were killed or hanged or something terrible. It was a dangerous gig they were doing. but were they famous? Like, could they land somewhere and people knew who they were? Did their reputation, even back then when news didn't travel nearly at light speed like it does today, were they well known? Maybe Eric will know. I'm really not sure. But things like that are really cool. And in Eric's books, he kind of talks about how pirates and privateers actually helped us win the war. And it doesn't really get taught in our history books that much. But the nuisances that these privateers caused the British, raiding their ships constantly, making trade difficult for the merchants in Britain. The high-ranking Britain merchants were pressuring the king. Look, just give them stupid Americans their land. They're messing up business. And a lot of that you can thank to the privateers that were out there raiding. And Eric's most famous book, let me see if I can bring a picture of it up. His most famous book, and I'll bring him on in 2 minutes, which was called Black Flags, Blue Waters, which kind of goes into a lot of pirates and a lot of the stories behind the pirates, which I thought is a really good read. If you didn't pick one up, you should check that out. But his book that was most recently out, let me see if I have it in the right order. There it is, Rebels at Sea, which is all about privateering. I have to admit, I didn't read Rebels at Sea yet. It got incredible reviews, so I ordered one about 2 days ago on Amazon. So don't tell Eric I didn't read it yet. But we're hoping that he's going to give us a little bit of insight into privateering. The whole thing is just really fascinating. And it seems like it was like a million gazillion years ago, but it really wasn't. I mean, 200 years ago, 250 years ago was like a drop in the bucket. You can almost reach out and touch those people. There's people born in the 1700s that we actually have photographs of. So it wasn't that long ago where the whole world changed. And these pirates who went from bandits to loved and respected and helped us win independence, and then back to bandits again and shunned and, it kind of became outlaws. So the whole story is really fascinating. So I'm going to bring on Eric in about a minute. And if anybody out there has any questions about pirates during the show, I'm going to try to keep an extra good look at the chat since I don't have Doug or Rich here today. I'll try to keep an eye on it myself and bring up your questions along with the 175,000 questions I have. Whew, my throat's going to be sore tomorrow, guys. What's this one here? I think Captain Jack Sparrow and Roberts were actually really good guys. Yeah, that Pirates of the Caribbean movie, I mean, that really put pirates back in the public eye. Not that they left, but it really, really got everybody's interest back again. I know it did for me. And I think some of the things, the Black Pearl ship was based loosely on the Queen Anne's Revenge ship of Blackbeard. It sure looks similar to me. But I just think it was really good for the genre. And I'm sure Eric will know because his book came out around that time during the meat and potatoes of the appeal of the Pirates of the Caribbean. Green Jean 71. Yes, he's given some names of some of the notable pirates. Yeah, I'm sure we'll be talking about some of them. Blackbeard, of course, Henry Morgan, Black Bart, Captain Kidd. Yeah, that was a big one. Ching Shi, Anne Bonny, all of them, so many of them. Oh, and thank you very much, Robert Legendre, if I'm pronouncing that right, for the super chat. But all right, guys, let me bring him in. I'm really excited about him. Like I said, Eric is a best-selling author and historian. He's written over a dozen books about American history. I think like 16, 18 books in general. His latest one, like I said, Rebels at Sea, about privateering and the American Revolution. Tonight, we're going to be diving into the world of pirates and privateers and how these so-called outlaws helped America win its independence. So please welcome everybody, acclaimed author, Eric Jay Dolin. How are you, Eric?
Good. How are you?
I am living the dream, my friend. Living the dream. I appreciate you making the time, man.
Sure.
Before the show, we were chatting a little bit, and Eric lives up in Massachusetts, not far from where we were just detecting. And he sort of kind of told me that he lives in an old house, and they sort of kind of invited me to detect it. I think we're going to have to touch base after the show. So we'll see about that. But I do love old houses either way. So, Eric, thank you again, like I said, for being on the show. Can you tell everyone a little bit about your background? Because I know educationally wise, you didn't actually go to school for this. It just became a love and a passion and took your life in that direction.
Right. Yeah. When I was young, I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau when I grew up. I was really into marine biology. So I ended up going to college pursuing a degree in biology. And then I realized that I wasn't that good in hard science. So I shifted to environmental policy. I finished my degree. Then I went and got a master's in environmental policy. And then I got a PhD in environmental policy, all along thinking that I wanted to be a professor. But by the time I finished my PhD, that desire was totally knocked out of me. I didn't apply for a single teaching job, even though I enjoyed teaching. When I was a PhD student, I taught 2 classes completely, and I TA'd about 8 classes to fund my graduate work. But I just realized the academic politics wasn't for me. So anyway, I went on and I worked for about 10 or 11 years, had a bunch of different jobs doing environmental stuff. And I suddenly decided that I loved writing. And I've been writing ever since. When I was a senior in high school, I wrote a 150-page paper on the seashells of Long Island Sound. I was really into seashells.
Oh, wow.
I was writing back then. I was writing op-eds. I was always writing on the side. But in the late 1990s, I was fed up with my job. And I said to my wife, I'd like to be a full-time writer. And after she stopped laughing, actually, she's very supportive. She said, fine, if you can put aside a year's worth of your salary, you can quit your job. So from 1990 to 2005, I wrote some more books, saved some money, and then I came up with this proposal for a book on whaling and sold that. And then finally in 2007, after that book came out and it did really well, my wife, we were watching the TV show House at night, and she turned to me on the couch and she said, you can quit your job. I said, what? You can quit your job. She set up a separate bank account. She'd been putting all the money I earned into it. She goes, you put aside enough money. And about 4 weeks later, I quit my job. So I've been a full-time writer ever since. And I am an historian because I write books about history and I love history. But the last history class I took was when I was a freshman in college, pretty much. So it's sort of just a passion. And I've been lucky enough to turn it into a career.
That's the American dream, man. And listen, as a guy who lives with an incredibly supportive wife himself, living my goofy dreams, that you're in a great position there. If you can make it through life and do something that you love and that you're passionate about, as long as the bills are getting paid and there's food on the table, you only live once, man. And, the book I read was absolutely fantastic. And I'm glad you decided to make the plunge because it is really enjoyable. I do have a copy too of your whaling book here, Leviathan.
That brings back memories.
Yeah, you have a really incredible collection of different things. It seems like I was trying to look for like what your theme might be. A lot of your books, do deal about the chaos of nature. There was a book about hurricanes, and there's a book about being trapped on a deserted island. Do you find yourself pulled towards stories of the chaos of nature or the chaos of the ambitions of men? Is that something that maybe psychologically you don't even realize, but you're always gravitating towards those topics?
Yeah, I think the thing that connects almost all of my books is they have a maritime focus. And I think that grew out of the fact that when I was a kid, I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau, and I was into seashells, and I've always lived within a few miles of the ocean. I'm here in Marblehead, and the ocean is literally a quarter of a mile away from me right now. So I love the ocean, and I love stories about the ocean. But I also, because of my environmental background, I love animals and wildlife. So a lot of my books sort of combine the two: whaling, the fur trade, the China trade. They have, nature components, but also they have components of how human beings interact through the medium of trade and on the ocean. And another way that I look at my books is they use a specific topic as a narrative backbone to tell a broader history, a broader story about American history. So my book on whaling, it has chapters on the American Revolution. It has chapters on the War of 1812. My book on the China trade also has chapters on both of those. My book on lighthouses, everybody thinks it's just a picture book. It's not. It basically is using lighthouses as a backbone to tell the story of the American colonies in the United States up until the present. So I just like telling stories. I like writing in a relatively simple way. And I just love the drama that comes from the ocean and humans trying to make a living on the ocean and interacting with people in other countries. And also with pirates, they are trying to make a living on the ocean. It's an illicit living. And privateers were trying to help their country come into being. So I'd say those are sort of the threads that run through a lot of my stuff.
Yeah, the pirates, like I said, that's why I wanted to have you on today to talk about pirates, which is such an interesting topic. So I'm going to jump into it a little bit. People always hear about the golden age of piracy.
Right.
When exactly, what era are they really talking about? And what made this golden age so unique?
Well, the Golden Age of Piracy is typically after the War of the Spanish Succession, about 1714, 1715 to about 1726. And it's the Golden Age because that's when Blackbeard, Sam Bellamy, other pirates that we've heard of and some we haven't. And it's also when the Pirates of the Caribbean really took place. There was also Caribbean piracy earlier, but the other part of piracy that I talk about a lot in my book is not considered, I consider it the golden age, but when your average person thinks about pirates, they think about Johnny Depp. They think about Pirates of the Caribbean, which is the 17 teens to the 1720s. But really, you have to go back to the 1680s and the Red Sea men who traveled around the Cape of Good Hope and went into the Indian Ocean and attacked Indian Mughal ships that were full of treasure and brought that treasure back to the colonies. That actually is the most successful era or part of piracy, and that's from the 1680s to about 1700. So I sort of define the golden age as going from about 1680 to 1726 when it petered out, but it never ended. I mean, we still have piracy today, but that's what I think most people refer to when they think about the golden age. And it was only golden because there were so many pirates and there were some big scores, but really most pirates had a miserable, short, brutish life. They either ended up at the end of a rope or they didn't succeed and they just filtered back into society, or they died in a shipwreck, or they died in a battle. They've glamorized piracy, and I'm not trying to bring anybody down. I think it's a great topic. I love it. But one of the comments I got when the book came out is a lot of people, in fact, one guy who came to one of my talks dressed up as a pirate, he says, I liked your book, but you sort of came down on them pretty hard, drink up me hearty. This is, they're more fun. Well, unfortunately, if you really look at the history, they're not particularly fun guys. And to get back to your initial question, you asked, what did they do when they went ashore? Well, they really didn't go ashore in the 17 teens because they were persona non grata. Nobody wanted them. So that's why they had Nassau and the Bahamas as their rendezvous point, and merchants would go down there and trade with them for the stuff they wanted. And they also would get stuff off of the ships that they pillaged. So, and even in the 1680s, it was very rare for pirates to go into ports to get stuff unless they were starting off their trip. They went to Madagascar and they had a retreat there. But the big difference is in the 1680s, 1690s, the American pirates were welcomed by the colonists because they were the sons, brothers, and fathers who went off to go halfway around the world to attack Indian ships and bring back treasure from these quote unquote infidels, non-Christians, and share it with the colonists who were being starved of silver by the mother country. So it's really fascinating. One of the things that I found most fascinating about the story is that in the 1680s and 1690s, the Red Sea pirates, even though it was illegal back then to be a pirate, and the crown and parliament looked down on what these colonists were doing, the colonists themselves really embraced the pirates because they were enriching their lives. And not only the colonists, but the crown appointed governors were getting kickbacks from the pirates who went halfway around the world when they came back to have permission to come back into port. But then you fast forward to the Johnny Depp era, sort of the Blackbeard era. And by that time, pirates were truly the enemies of all mankind. And the American colonists did not like them at all, because instead of attacking Muslim ships halfway around the world in the 17 teens and 1720s, who were they attacking? They were attacking British ships and colonial ships. So it really depends on whose ox is being gored. If your money's being taken, you don't like that. But if somebody else's money is being taken and it's being distributed to you, you love that.
Sure. Yeah. So they started off with like a Robin Hood sort of a mystique to the colonists because they were benefiting from it. But once the pirates, I don't know if I'm going to say greedy or whatever their reasons were, started attacking ships that the colonists were invested in, then things took a turn for the worse and they really got vilified.
Yes.
I have a question here. I'm going to try to answer questions, even though they might jump around a little bit. From Relic Dog said, were the Barbary pirates the most successful pirates? If you were comparing one pirate in monetary gain to another, I'm not familiar with them offhand, so maybe you are.
Say that again. Sorry, I was trying to read some of your comments.
Oh, it's okay.
And according to Scott Cash 1, what happened is I became a hot mess because I totally lost the train of what you were saying.
That's okay. I put the question on the screen. Relic Dog was asking, were the Barbary pirates the most successful pirates? And I'm assuming he means successful because of the monetary gain that they got.
Well, the Barbary pirates I didn't talk about in my book because those are the Tripolitan pirates off the coast of Morocco and in the Mediterranean in the early 1800s. And yes, they were Muslim pirates, and they were very successful because they captured a lot of European and American ships. But that ended up resulting in the Barbary Wars, of the Tripolitan Wars, where Thomas Jefferson sent our nascent or our new navy over there to punish these Muslim marauders, and they did. Then there was subsequently a treaty that stopped them from attacking American ships, but I don't really talk about that in my book. The most successful of all pirates were the Red Sea pirates. Some of them really brought back what today might have been many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. The least successful pirates, except for Sam Bellamy, were the ones that were operating in the 17 teens and 1720s. Blackbeard, who everybody focuses on, mainly because he didn't have a good PR agent at the time, but he had a great name. Everybody focuses on him, but if you look at his career, it only lasted for about a year and a half. He didn't get very much in the way of treasure. He did amass a large fighting force. At one point, he had 5 ships and 400 men under his command. But even when they blockaded Charleston Harbor for an entire week, the only thing they got out of it was about $500 worth of products and clothes. They didn't hold the entire town for ransom. Some of his men had syphilis, so he wanted a medicine chest, which the governor of the colony provided to him. But think about it. He had 400 men. He had 5 ships. The problem is he couldn't go into Charleston and take over the entire town. There were too many people there, too many cannons. So he just stayed out in the periphery in the water. And after about a week, he decided to move further up the coast and ultimately met his demise off Ocracoke Island when the British Navy was essentially sent to capture him. He was killed in a battle on board one of the ships, on one of his own ships. And they cut his head off and they put it in the bowsprit of one of his own sloops and sailed it and the remaining pirates back to Virginia for trial. And the only thing that's really horrible is trial transcripts are great for getting the stories about what these pirates did. But unfortunately, Blackbeard's trial, which was a multi-day event, and they had great transcripts that somebody wrote down, there was a fire in later years, and all the information, all the depositions and everything else about that trial was burned up.
Oh, wow. Really? So there's hardly any information about those firsthand accounts of the trial?
Yeah, no, there's some information, but not a lot.
Not like there was.
With Steve Bonnet or Captain Kidd or Sam Bellamy, those trials, there was a lot of information collected by the judge and the lawyers, and it was subsequently published or put into archives. So you really can get a good sense from the pirates themselves, the men on the ships. They tell the story of what they did.
Wow. I have a picture. Obviously, there wasn't cameras back then, but I have a picture here of Blackbeard. A lot of the pictures you see of Blackbeard, he has like these burning embers off the side of his beard. Is that accurate? And was that just to instill fear in people, or is that just part of the mystique that made up, some of these pirates?
Well, think about it. Is it accurate? What do you think would happen if you lit? The way it's described is in Charles Johnson's book, The Book of Pirates, which came out in 1724, where we get a lot of good information, but it's also a lot of it is hype. Some people think Daniel Defoe wrote that book, but the odds are he didn't. But in that book, he talks about Blackbeard, and he talks about how he would curl his hair up and he would put matches at the end, the tip of his hair. He'd light them on fire when he was going into battle to make him look even more fearsome than he did normally. Well, think about it. You want to have a fire next to your hair under a hat? There is no way that he did this. It is just all hype, PR, I don't know, exaggeration, and but it's become part of his mythic, character. And the other thing is, people view, when you talk about Blackbeard, people will think that he is a vicious pirate. Well, looking through the actual data that we have, there's only one instance of a ship that he took over where he was violent at all, and it was minimal violence. He basically whipped somebody a little bit. And there's another story that came from this Charles Johnson's, where at one point, one of his men, Israel Hands, supposedly he shot him with a pistol under the table while they were playing cards. And when asked why he did that, it was basically, well, you need to put these guys in line every once in a while and show them who's boss. There's no way he did not do that, because there's Israel Hands is a real character, and later he was part of the trial. So, and he ended up, Israel Hands ended up going back to London, and he was a beggar on the street. People used to give him money. He used to beg on the street.
Wow. So Blackbeard wasn't that bad of a guy, you're saying? He was
based on the record that we had. I mean, he obviously must have been fairly.
Well, I'm not saying he was an angel,
as a leader, because people decided to follow him. And the only thing we know about what he looked like is he didn't have a black beard. Some people that were taken by him talked about that. He supposedly was thin and tall, but whether he was ferocious or whether he led by power of personality, we're not exactly sure, because there's not a lot of information about that. But the point I wanted to make is that his meteoric rise and fall was very quick. And when you look at it from an abstract perspective, did he have a lot of money? No. Or if he did, it totally disappeared with his men when they sort of broke up in North Carolina.
Yeah. To talk about that for just a second, as someone that metal detects and we look for old treasures and things all the time, there's a lot of allure about pirates that would like bury their treasure on the beaches of places and pirate maps and X marks the spot and all that stuff. Is there any truth to these, or are these more just things that evolved over time to make the whole mystique of piracy accurate? Or is there truth to some of these where these pirates did bury their treasures and would come back for it later, and maybe something happened in between?
Well, that's one of the most persistent myths, that there's buried treasure, just like walking the plank. Why would you have somebody walk the plank if you wanted to kill him? You just stab him, shoot him, push him over the side. So that's another thing, that we only have one record of that happening. It was in the early 1800s in the Caribbean, not during the Golden Age of Piracy. As for burying treasure, I want to believe that it is true. There is not a single piece of evidence of any pirates burying treasure for a long period of time. There is one story I tell in the book about one pirate that actually offloaded the treasure to the beach for a short period of time while they're trying to fix up their boat. But in terms of, think about it practically, you're a pirate, you're in a ship, you're in an area, maybe you know this island, maybe you don't. Let's say you know the island. Are you going to take your treasure off of your ship where it's under your control, bury it on an island where other guys on your ship might know that you buried it, and then leave in the hope that you're, one, going to survive to come back, two, know how to navigate back there, and three, not be poached in the interim? When pirates had money, a lot of times they spent it quickly in Nassau, or sometimes they went to some other places in Madagascar, but they wanted to keep the money close by. Samuel Bellamy and the Widow, That's the most famous pirate ship, I think, of all time, because it's really the only true pirate ship that had treasure that's been found, and it sank off of Cape Cod. Yeah, that's from a cigarette. There was a cigarette advertisement from the 1800s. We have no idea what Samuel Bellamy looked like, but he had $20,000 in probably gold doubloons and pieces of silver 8 reals. And I bet he didn't look like that, but maybe.
No, super handsome there.
That's from the Widow Pirate Museum, which is a great museum. If you
right
ever
around
want to go to a great museum, go to the museum in West Yarmouth, the Widow Pirate Museum, because the guy who discovered the Widow in 1984, and now, this is how old I'm getting. I totally am spacing on his name, so I apologize.
It's Barry something.
Barry Clifford.
Yes, Barry Clifford.
Studied the old maps. There was actually a map created right after the crash of the Widow that showed roughly where it had sank. And he took every piece of information he could find, and then he took some high-tech boats and sonar and other detecting mechanisms, tools like you guys do on land. And in 1984, he finally struck gold, literally, and silver, and he found the wreck of the Widow. And it was only 1,500 feet from the beach, roughly where Marconi Beach is in Yarmouth and that area. And other people had looked for it. And over the years, people had found coins. This one guy in 1900 reported that he had found 400 old coins, cogs, and other stuff walking along the beach in that area. But people looked for it. People dove out there before 1984, but he was the one that found it. And as far as I know, I wrote the book years ago, but when I wrote the book, he had investors who helped him do all this. They recovered a lot, not just cannons and pieces of people's bodies who died on board, but they recovered thousands of coins that are definitely worth, I would guess, millions or hundreds of millions.
Hundreds of millions for sure.
And I don't think they've sold a single coin.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
That's when I wrote the book. That's what I was told. And I have no record of them selling them. I don't know what the guy down in, what is that guy? Oh, the guy that found the treasure from the 1715 hurricane, Mel Fisher.
Yeah, Mel Fisher.
Mel Fisher started a museum too. I don't know if Mel Fisher and that hoard that he found, if he sold any of it to the public.
They do. They still actively sell it on their website.
Okay.
But
it's great. I'd love to. When I wrote the book, every time I write a book, when it's done, I try to buy something that sort of I remember the book by. So when I was writing this pirate book, I was writing about pirate treasure. So I naively thought, when I finished the book, I'm going to buy a piece of 8, not a gold doubloon.
Right.
Well, the book did very well, but to get a nice piece of 8, not a piece of crap that just looks like looks like a slug, to get a nice piece of 8, you're talking about $15,000-$20,000.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't want it that bad.
No, especially if there's provenance where it came from the Widow or of any famous shipwreck, that price goes up 100 times fold.
Right.
And I had heard, and maybe you would know, I had heard the Widow, which crashed right off of Cape Cod in only like 15 feet of water too. So if you knew where it wasn't unobtainable. But I had heard that the Widow went down to Florida because of the 1715 fleet crashed off Florida. Everyone knew about it. 15 or so ships filled with gold going to Spain. The Widow actually went down and raided one of those sunken ships, filled itself up with treasure, went back up north, and then it crashed in a storm. Is that true? Is that where the money originally came from?
Listen, I don't want to disagree with the host, but that's all wrong.
Not true. I don't, this is why you're here.
The Widow was originally a slave ship.
Okay.
It had a bunch of slaves, about 500 slaves, and it went to Port Royal, and it sold the slaves. That's why there was so much money on the ship. And now again, I keep saying I'm getting old, but the original name of the Widow, it had a different name. Anyway, they sold that. They sold all the slaves successfully. Then the ship was coming away, and it was captured later by
Oh,
these
okay.
guys. Or am I getting? Wait a second. This is horrible. Am I getting confused? I think I'm confusing. No, that was the Widow, and that's where the most of the money came from. But Sam Bellamy and Williams and Palsgrave Williams, who was his co-pirate for much of the time, they originally, where you're getting it mixed up, they originally went down to Florida to dive
Yeah.
on the wrecks. So
Right.
those two guys went down. Most people who went to dive on the wrecks, and there were a huge number of ships that wrecked, it was the Spanish treasure fleet that
Yes.
got caught in a hurricane. So the people that went down to dive on the wreck, very few of them found treasure. And the Spanish went there very quickly to try
Yeah,
to
they did.
retrieve as much as they could. So Bellamy and Williams were frustrated. They were down in the Caribbean, and they said, hey, we're here. Let's go a pirating. And
Yeah.
they started with a small boat, and they sort of worked their way up. And they finally had a small fleet, and they captured, according to the records, 50 different ships before they made their big score with this former slave ship. And that's
Wow.
why they had so much money. And they went north, and they were heading north to Maine to clean the ship. Keel, oh, wait a second, what's the term? This is horrible. I'm forgetting all my terms. But anyway, they were supposed to go up to Maine, where Palsgrave Williams on his ship and Bellamy on the Widow were supposed to meet up in an island where they were going to decide where to go next and also clean the hulls of the ship. But a major nor'easter came down, caught the Widow, sent it to the bottom near shore. Palsgrave Williams skirted the storm or made it through the storm, went up north. All of a sudden, his buddy's not there. And then when he comes down south, he's told by a fisherman that he encounters that the Widow sank, and the rest of those pirates are on trial in Boston right now. Can you imagine how upset you would be
Yeah.
if you knew that there was $20,000 worth of coins, which was a lot of money back then, and suddenly it's beyond your grasp? You had collected this over a year, working diligently as a conscientious pirate, and all of a sudden it's gone.
Easy come, easy go, right?
Yeah.
No, that's one of the, and I think the Widow is still being dove today,
Yes.
and they're
Yep,
still
it
finding
is.
treasure 40 years later, still pulling
Yep.
treasure up.
They're pulling these. Well, you probably know more about this than I do, but when you have all that metal and stuff in sand over time, there are a lot of different chemical reactions that
Yes.
take place. And what happens is the sand sort of concretes into these masses. So what they do is a lot of it, they're pulling up this mass of, it looks sort of like iron ore. And then they bring it into their little archaeological lab, they spray water on it, and they pick through it. And in that mass, they find all these coins, they find bones, they find cannons. Now, maybe early on, they just sucked up the sand, and they probably sucked up some coins. I have seen pictures, I don't know if they're real, of some diving on the treasure fleet in Florida, where I think Mel Fisher and maybe other people, they actually saw coins on the bottom. You could see them right there. So maybe they're not always hidden. But I got to say one thing, because I'm not a detectorist.
Okay.
Is that the term you use?
Yeah, it's a term we use.
I think it is so cool because I see detectorists on our little beach here, Devereaux Beach, every once in a while, and I see them on other beaches, and I'm just fascinated. And I watched a couple of your videos, and I think it must be the great. What does every kid want to do? They want to go find treasure, and you guys are using this tool to go out there, and you don't know what you're going to find.
No,
everybody. It's just like going into a casino. Everybody thinks they're going to win. Most people lose.
Right.
But you seem to win if you put enough effort in. You at least find interesting things, even if they're not valuable.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there's different mindsets of detectorists. Not that I want to veer from the topic too much, but to me, I would rather find something 250 years old that monetarily is worthless if it's an interesting piece of history, than go find a gold ring that was lost last year because it's
Right.
worth 4,000. I don't care. Not that I don't care about money, but that's not why I do it.
Right.
So, and when you see those guys at the beach, same mentality. Some people will comb the beaches looking for modern jewelry drops because it's a financial windfall, which is fine. But some people, especially after a storm, you may see more people converge because when that storm comes in and it pulls some erosion out, they're looking for things like the Witta treasure that will be exposed. It's sitting on that bedrock under 10 feet of sand. And when
Right.
that big storm comes in, pulls it out. And if you find a coin on the beach, a public beach, that's free game. That's yours. Where if I went out into the water, even like knee high, and I found a coin,
It's
well,
estates.
Barry owns that. Whoever has the salvage rights to that Witta now
Wow.
becomes, but on the beach, free game. And it might not be up to your need. It's up to a certain distance, but I couldn't go
Right.
dive the Witta if I wanted to.
Right.
But on the beach, I can get it. So that's kind of the fun area is that we're all sort of treasure hunters. It's like Christmas morning.
Yeah.
And unlike the casino where I'm risking my money at the table,
Right.
once you buy your equipment,
it's only
it's
upside.
it's only upside and time,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
but you know, but anyway, it is a lot of fun. Next time I come up near Marblehead, I told you I was just near Plymouth.
Okay.
I'll bring a machine. You're welcome to join us. It's a lot of fun.
Okay.
So let me go to a couple of pirates real quick because I know there's some fascinating stories about them. Everyone's heard of Captain Kidd,
Right.
which is a super famous pirate.
Third-rate pirate.
As a third,
Well, there's a big controversy. Some people don't think he's a pirate at all, and he was totally framed by the English government who needed a fall guy because so many pirates were causing problems in the Red Sea. But my reading of the history is that he first of all, he was an arrogant SOB.
Yeah, I heard that.
He made a lot of bad decisions, but he was a small-time pirate. There are 2 or 3 ships that he actually took in the Indian Ocean that didn't have French passes. He had letters of marque that enabled him as a privateer to capture both pirates and French ships because England was at war with France. So he captured a couple of ships that were just ships that had some stuff on it, and he let his men, or he was overpowered by his men, depending on how you look at it, take stuff off and didn't return it. That's small-scale piracy. The big controversy is he captured 2 Mughal ships, Indian ships, one of which had a fair amount of money on it. And both of them had French passes on board. But the problem is they were actually Indian ships, one owned by the emperor, one a Dutch ship. But back then, people used false flags and false documentation. So probably in the cabin of those 2 ships, they had French passes, English passes, Indian passes. But those French passes should have gotten Kidd off for those 2 ships probably. But when those passes were sent back to England, they mysteriously disappeared. So I do have some sympathy for Kidd. But his story, just like Blackbeard's, became larger than life because at one point he claimed that he had captured $400,000 worth of treasure. But in the end, the only treasure that we know for sure that he had was probably around $14,000 worth, which is still considerable. But he became mythological because he was put in a cage at the mouth of the Thames after they tried him. They hung him and he fell first, and they had to tie him up again. And
I think I have a gruesome image here.
Yeah, that's what he looked like. That's the only, that painting on the left is the only what we think that's him. He was a big brawny guy. He actually made his chops. He was a privateer in the late 1600s, and some people say he might have veered into buccaneering down in the Caribbean. But it's a violent debate between people who think he was totally framed and people who think he was a pirate. I think he was a third-rate pirate, and he made a lot of bad decisions, and he picked up a crew of 150 men who were under a no prey, no pay system. If they didn't capture ships, they got no money. He was unsuccessful for many, many months. They became restless. They became ornery. And I think they started doing things that were well beyond what their letters of marque were supposed to let them do. But he definitely got screwed a bit when he got back to England.
Yeah. And I think when I read that he was tarred also before he was hung Is that true? Like where he was
Yeah,
put on display, tarred and hung down
well,
by the Thames?
that's to maintain your shape. It basically, if you're not tarred and you're put in that case, that sort of metal contraption, your bone, you'll slowly waste away, and all that will be left is your bones and your tattered clothes, which might be very scary for a ship coming in the mouth of the Thames and thinking, well, if I pursue piracy, this is what's going to happen to me. But by tarring him, they basically kept his form longer, so he looked like
Oh,
a real person. Also, it may have been just an insult, because tarring back then was considered it was a really bad punishment when you were alive, especially when you were tarred and feathered.
oh yeah, and the message it sends, like, to the people out there to see that hanging up by the Thames has got to be
Right.
crazy.
Oh yeah.
Um, I'm gonna address a few. I'll call them basic pirate questions because if
Okay.
people aren't, and I'm not sure. My moderator Teresa, the treasure hunter, asked, "What is buccaneering?" When she said that, I'm not sure I know. I've heard that term buccaneering. What does that mean exactly?
Well, buccaneering is back in the mid to later 1600s in Hispaniola, now Haiti and the Dominican Republic, but it was back then. It was called Hispaniola, and there were people from all different countries. There were English, Dutch, Swedish, French, sort of vagrants is the wrong word, but they were sort of outcasts from society, and they gathered on this island and they started raising cattle, the cattle that were the descendants of the ones that Christopher Columbus brought over.
Oh, okay.
And then they would kill the cattle, they would cut up the meat, and they would basically turn it into beef jerky by putting it in a fireplace, which was called a boucan, and they would have wood strips over the fire, and then they'd drape the meat over the wood strips. They'd smoke it to create this beef jerky. And since they were doing this at a boucan, and they were doing it, they were called Buccaneers, which became
Ah,
Buccaneer in English. Now they were minding their own business. They had a business. They basically cured this meat and sold it to passing ships, many of which were Spanish, because the Spanish really believed that they owned the Caribbean. And I suppose technically they did, because of they were there.
yeah.
So the Spanish were getting fed by these buccaneers, but then they didn't like how many of them there were, and they felt that they were taking advantage of Spain's hospitality. So they were run off of Hispaniola to a small island called Tortuga, which is turtle in Spanish, which is just north of Hispaniola. Now you've heard of Tortuga because of Johnny Depp, Pirates of the
Yes.
Caribbean. So they were forced off of Hispaniola to go to Tortuga, and they continued to cure meat. But the Spanish Costa Guarda, the Coast Guard essentially of Spain, kept bothering them. And they said, screw this. We're not going to sell meat to them. We're going to get in boats and we're going to go take their ships. So they
Oh,
became buccaneers. And
oh,
that's
I
what they
see.
did for many years. And basically, Henry Morgan was a buccaneer for some time. It's very tricky identifying these people. Are they privateers? Are they buccaneers? They have letters of marque. But the buccaneers, the true buccaneers in the 1660s, 1670s, they were just men who decided to become pirates and prey primarily on Spanish shipping. So
Gotcha.
buccaneers was just another term for pirate.
Right. A pirate that sought out a specific victim because they felt
Yeah,
oppressed by the Spanish.
and had a specific history.
Right, right.
So,
Oh, pretty, really interesting there. I also have, if you're not familiar with some of the terminology, I'll bring up a picture here. If you can explain what a privateer is, in case they don't know, because
oh, sure.
you mentioned the letters of marque, and I'll bring one up while you're talking about it. I'll put it in full screen if anyone wants to read it. What
Wow. Cool.
exactly is the difference between a privateer and a pirate?
Okay, well, pirates essentially are men who are operating on their own behalf to enrich themselves, enemies of all mankind. They typically will attack any ship They don't have any allegiance to any particular country, and they're basically highwaymen on the ocean. Privateers, people often call privateers pirates by another name, but there is a distinction. They have the same, it's sort of like Liam Neeson in his movies Taken. I'm a man with a particular set of skills. Well, privateers and pirates have the exact same set of skills. They can attack ships and take them. The big difference is privateers have a letter of marque. A letter of marque is a government document issued during wartime that gives the owner of that document, or the ship owner and the people on that ship, the right to attack enemies during wartime, capture their ships as prizes, bring them back to courts of admiralty, where if it's determined that it is a just prize and it was actually an enemy ship, the privateers, the owners of the ship, and the men who fought on that ship are able to sell the ship and its contents, and all the money that they generate gets split 50-50. 50% goes to the men who did the fighting, 50% goes to the owner and the investors. So it's basically using a financial incentive to create quote unquote patriots. And they were patriotic during the American Revolution. A lot of privateers did it not only for the opportunity for financial gain, but because they believed in what their country was, what the colonists were trying to do to become their own country. So the distinction is privateers are operating during a time of war, and they have government permission to attack enemy ships. The reason it gets so confused is there are many instances in which privateers, people that are issued letters of marque by a government, but they're issued those letters of marque during peacetime, like Henry Morgan was. When he attacked the Spanish, England and Spain were not at war at that time. So technically he was a pirate or a buccaneer. And but Queen Elizabeth was happy when he brought back a lot of money. The same thing as Drake, Sir Francis Drake. He's considered in English history by the British and English people to be a great character in their history, because he went to the Pacific Ocean, he attacked Spain, he attacked galleons and other ships, brought back a ton of money equivalent to almost the annual income of the crown at the time. Wow. And he was knighted. But Spain considered him a pirate because he was attacking Spanish ships at a time when Spain and England weren't officially at war. So that's why privateering has a real bad reputation. But even if it didn't have that bad reputation, there is something a little bit unsavory, perhaps, about giving a private individual and a ship the right to go attack your enemies. Why don't you send your Navy out? Well, that's where it got interesting during the American Revolution. We didn't have a Navy. And our Continental Navy, we tried to whip it together very fast. It didn't do a great job. A lot of the ships we built were built with green wood, so they leaked at a horrendous rate, even when they tried to leave port. And other than a couple of encounters, the Continental Navy, the 60 or so Continental Navy ships, met an ignominious end. Many of them were burned, many of them were captured, many of them sunk. So there were 2,000 privateering vessels, American. Wow. They captured nearly 2,000 British ships. That really put a damper in the British merchants' spirits, as you said, and it contributed to the sort of anger that the British populace was feeling about this war that just went on and on and on, which they originally thought they were going to win within 5 months because they were going up against this American rabble. But little did they know the Americans had more fight in them than the British did at the time.
Yeah, reading the stories about the privateering, it's just incredible because we were such a nuisance, for lack of a better word. I mean, we were going up. The British were the biggest empire in the world. Right. A little hurt coming off their own war with France, but still incredibly powerful. And by us, getting these privateers to go out and cause so much chaos and attack these ships, it really was a turning point, I think, on the sea. Without them, who knows how the whole Revolutionary War would have really unfolded.
Right. I mean, it's hard to prove what would happen. There's
Sure.
no test case. But I happen to believe, and I've said before, that without privateering, I think we very well might not have won the war. I think it would have been much, much closer. But then again, there are 1,000 things that could have happened.
Yeah.
If George Washington wasn't so good at losing and then moving before he got annihilated, we would have lost the war. If some of these British admirals and generals had just made one different decision, instead of backing off or going a different direction, or if they hadn't been so arrogant and they thought this was going to be a cakewalk, Britain would have won. And you know what? We were lucky. Britain should have won.
For sure.
They had so much more firepower than we did. They just underestimated us at the beginning. And by the time they started to take us more seriously, we had become more powerful. And then finally, when France came in on our side, it really helped turn the tide.
It sure did.
Also, it helped that we had the Atlantic Ocean in between us.
Well,
if we had been on the continent, the war would have lasted 2 weeks.
Yeah, oh, for sure. No doubt about that. Now, I have another question about the privateers. Now, I don't know if there was like a code of war back then where, maybe you would take the enemy as a prisoner, where a privateer, because they were civilians, you would most likely kill them if you were a British soldier. But because they had this letter of marque, does that then give them a classification of a soldier where they would be taken as a prisoner? No. So that didn't mean anything.
As a prisoner. No, the British viewed privateers as pirates, which is kind of funny.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of rich, because the British turned to privateering in 1777 after they said they wouldn't do it, and they sent out their own privateers, and they're the ones that invented privateering, and they've been doing it for hundreds of years, and they did it during the French and Indian War when American privateers helped them beat the French. So it's really rich when you hear the British complain about Americans using these pirates, these privateers. It's somehow dishonorable. But if you can get beyond that, it was just a great strategy, because it's what we needed to do without having a powerful navy. And they not only attacked British merchant ships, they also attacked a few British warships. They usually got the worst end of it. But there were some privateers, like the Grand Turk, that was a 300-ton vessel with it was pierced for up to 30 cannons. So it's a pretty powerful ship. And so I know you had a different question in there that I totally spaced out on.
I have so many. I'll probably skip around, and it might even come back. It might even come back around again. And again, listen, I'm going to try to keep my eyes on the questions in the chat. If you have any, please put them in there. If I miss it, I apologize. I will try to double back. Another pirate question I had is, like you said, Blackbeard wasn't nearly as terrifying and brutal as history likes to portray him. Right. But I think some pirates were.
Yes. Absolutely.
What pirates would you say were someone that you just did not want to meet in a dark alley?
I think Ned Lowe is the worst. And he was operating at the end of the Golden Age in like 1724. There he is.
Yeah.
Edward Lowe, or Ned Lowe. He went down to the Caribbean also during that phase where a lot of people were going down there to dive on the Spanish treasure ships that had sunk. And he slowly worked his way up. And we have so many records of him attacking ships and, cutting people. One of his signature moves was cutting the noses and ears off of his victims.
Oh my goodness.
Cooking them a little bit over a fire and forcing them to eat their own flesh before running them through. We have a couple of eyewitness reports where this happened. He also, at one point, he captured a Spanish ship down in the Caribbean, and there was a bag of gold and silver on the ship. And one of the men took that bag of gold and silver. It was on a rope. They held it over the bow of the ship, and before Edward Lowe and his men could get to it, he used a knife to cut the rope. So all that money fell into the water. When Ned Lowe found out about this, he not only killed that man, he killed all 30 Spanish crewmen on the
Wow.
ship out of spite. So
Yeah.
he was just a miserable guy. He actually started out as a rigger in Boston. We know a little bit about his early life. I mean, and he got married, and apparently his wife, there were some problems, and then she died, and he was disconsolate. And we know this for a fact because he captured a bunch of American fishing vessels off of Nova Scotia, and he forced many of them, the men on board, to become pirates. But if they were married men, he wouldn't, because he was thinking back on his own marriage. And so he'd ask them, "Are you married?" And the funny story is, I'm sitting right here in my house. 4 doors down is a house that was built in 1710. It was the home of Philip Ashton. Philip Ashton was on a fishing vessel off Nova Scotia and was captured by Ned Lowe. Ned Lowe forced him to become a pirate. When they were down in the Bay of Honduras, Philip Ashton went ashore on Roatan Island, a small uninhabited island. He went on shore with a couple of other pirates. They were going there to collect some water. Well, he took his chance and he escaped into the brush. They looked for him. They couldn't find him. And Ned Lowe finally said, "Screw him. Let's go." That guy, Philip Ashton, survived on that island alone for about 15 months, then another about 8 months with a couple of other people. And he was finally picked up by a ship from Salem, Massachusetts, where they're having Halloween tomorrow, right next door. A ship from Salem, Massachusetts picked him up, brought him back. Everybody here thought he was dead. There was not a word. Nobody knew what had happened to him. They thought he was dead. And he walked into that house.
Wow.
And shocked his parents. And then there was a book. A local minister helped him write a book about his experience. And they referred to Philip Ashton as the American Robinson Crusoe.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's a great story.
That's amazing. No,
there's a plaque. There's a plaque on that house 2 doors down that said, "This is the home of Philip Ashton, mariner."
Really?
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. I think you even have, let me think. I think it's this one. Forgive me if I'm wrong. You actually have a book about a story about people. I think there was 5 men shipwrecked, and they had to survive for 18 months or something like that.
Right. No, 534 days.
Oh, the exact days, Wow, that must be a good record.
Yeah, that's on the Falkland Islands. That was my last book. That was after Rebels at Sea.
Okay.
It was a fun book to write. It's a military book. There's a shipwreck, the British, the Americans, the War of 1812. It's really a great story. And I just finished another book. I have another book coming out in June called I have it. The Mentor. You have it?
Yeah, I have it.
Oh, good. There it is. It looks a similar title, but it's a totally different story. This is a story about a whale ship in the 1830s from New Bedford that went into the Pacific Ocean and crashed on the island of Palau, which is about 500 to 600 miles east of the Philippines, roughly.
Wow.
And a bunch of guys die during the crash. They end up encountering the natives, which are very primitive natives. And they get involved in local wars. The Americans, they try to escape. They try to get back to the Moluccas, the Spice Islands. They get thrown off course. They land on another island where the natives are much less hospitable than the first natives. One guy's murdered. Some of them starve. And basically, some of the people from this wreck are in Palau for more than 4 years, and they're finally rescued by a naval mission that was sent by Andrew Jackson to go get them.
Wow. Andrew Jackson, not known for his kindness either.
No. Well, there were a bunch of these so-called beachcombers and people that were on islands against their will in the Pacific. So one of the main reasons the ship was sent, the Vincennes, a very big ship with almost 300 Marines on it. One of the reasons it was sent, one of the main reasons, was because of the Mentor, but they also picked up 18 other men from different islands who were there either involuntarily or just were beachcombers that jump ship and they wanted to come back to the United States. So it's a great story. I just got the layouts for it today, and it's coming out in June 2nd. I think after that, I won't do another shipwreck story. I don't know. I sort of bounce around. I don't know what's next. I'm looking around for my next book topic.
Something interesting.
Maybe I'll write about the quarter hoarder.
Hey, listen, we find some good stuff. I got some questions here that came through from the chat, so I'm going to jump to that. There's been a lot of them, so I'm not going to show a specific. Well, I'll just pick one in general, but a lot of people are asking about Oak Island. And what are your now? Listen, from a detectorist, let me give you my perspective first. As a detectorist, I think it's a lot of TV shenanigans. 10 seasons or whatever, they don't find anything. But from a pirate aspect, what do you think of that show? I'm sure it's over embellished, but is it embedded in any sort of historic truth?
I have to tell you, I only saw one episode because when I wrote the book, people mentioned that. From what I understand, they're looking for William Kidd, supposedly stored some stuff up there. Captain Kidd, there's no way. That is BS. He didn't make it to Nova Scotia. And the fact that they had 10 seasons and didn't find anything, what are you talking? It's got to be snake oil. It's all TV. Yeah. And as I said before, nobody was burying treasure. And the one episode I saw was the most infuriating. They were drilling a hole. It looked like in solid bedrock. And then they got down to the bottom and we found something, and they're all excited and all this hype. And then they bring it up. I think it was a rock, or it was just
something. Yeah.
Listen, people are very gullible. That's fine if you want to believe this stuff, but don't take it for real history. And I want to answer. I looked in the
go ahead.
The comments. No. Somebody asked me, do I know about the Shenandoah? Oh yeah, I wrote a whole chapter in my book on whaling. About the Civil War, and Raphael Semmes and the Alabama and the Shenandoah, these Confederate raiders that attacked a whole bunch of American whale ships, destroyed 24 of them because they wanted to cripple the Union commerce. And I have a whole chapter on that. In fact, it was so exciting when I was writing it. I talked to my editor and I said, can I stop writing this book on whaling and write a book just about the Shenandoah and the Alabama and the Civil War? And it was a good thing they said no, because right after my book came out, 2 books came out on the Alabama and the Shenandoah, and neither of them did very well. So
really?
It's good. But it's a great story.
Oh, that's a good one. And listen, I have to say the Oak Island, I think we're going to be having Gary Drayton on in a month or so. So I'm not saying the show's hogwash. I'm just saying.
No, they found treasure. 10 seasons. They probably made millions of dollars.
See?
So they were the best pirates of all. They robbed all of us.
That's right. Treasure is where you find it. You never know. Yeah. There's a question here from Jay Diggs. I'm trying to read it. I'm not really sure. He's saying something about was the eye patch to have one eye ready for entering dark holds of captured ships. I'm guessing so your eye would, your retina would expand so you could have that dark. Is there any sort of truth to eye patches in general? Is that kind of hogwash? Give me the skinny on the eye patch.
Just in my research, I didn't run across any real accounts of people with eye patches. I know they had them, and I've also seen that argument before, but I've also seen it ripped apart by people who are ophthalmologists and other people. I don't think it's true. But I haven't done a deep dive on it. But think also peg legs is another thing.
Yeah, and peg legs. And the parrot.
They did have parrots. I don't think there were many captains walking around with a parrot on their shoulder, but they did have parrots and animals on board. But for peg legs, there were definitely pirates who had their legs blown off. There were definitely prosthetic peg legs at this time and earlier. There were definitely pirates who had to retire, and they probably got a prosthetic wooden leg. Were there many or any on board a ship? Well, think about it. A ship is rolling around in the open ocean. Yeah. It's difficult enough to maintain your balance when you've got 2 good legs. My guess is there were very few, if any, pirates with peg legs. Now, they didn't have a social security system back then, really.
Yeah, that's true.
They just were dumped off. As I said, most pirates, during the Golden Age, the late 1700s, 17 teens, there were more than 400 pirates hanged. That's a lot of pirates,
Yeah.
considering we only think there were about 2,000 who operated during that decade or so. And then there were other pirate ships that sank. There were other pirates who got killed during hand-to-hand battle. So it was really a miserable career choice, but they didn't have many other good options. When
Yeah.
you were poor back then, life was short and miserable.
It was. And like I said, when you read about these pirates, go pick one on your own. They didn't live very long. They didn't pirate very
Yeah,
long. It
right.
must have been a truly, we glamorize it now. It was tough. Can you walk us through a daily life aboard a pirate ship? If I was Joe Schmo crew member, what can I expect on a day of pirating?
Well, a lot of just hanging around. The pirate ships, just like privateers, they needed a lot of people on board to present a fearsome offensive. Let's say a sloop or snow or whatever. Let's say you had a 70-foot ship back then. 5 guys, 5 good guys, 8 guys, a crew could easily manage a ship of that size. An 80-foot pirate ship might have 100 men on board,
Wow.
100 pirates, because when they come up against a merchant ship, they want that merchant ship to be able to use their spyglass and look across the waves to this black flag, the Jolly Roger on the mainmast, and 100 heavily armed men milling around on the main deck. You are not going to put your life on the line for that. And that's why most of the merchant ships that pirates captured surrendered willingly or unwillingly, but
Oh, okay.
they surrendered. So most of the time, pirates were trying to go where there was prey, so the shipping lanes. And a lot of their days were just like whaling ships. On whaling ships, you were looking for a whale. Now, a good greasy voyage on a whaling ship might come back with 1,500, 2,000 barrels of oil. They may kill dozens or scores of whales, but that's over 4 years. There are times, even on a good whaling voyage, when you could go an entire month without killing a whale. You might see whales spouting in the future. It's the same with pirates. They might go a month, 2 months before they come upon a ship that they can attack, because they might find a ship that's too big, or they might find nothing. The ocean is huge,
Yeah.
and they didn't have radar. They didn't have any way of figuring out what was over the horizon more than 5 or 10 miles away. So a lot of the days of a pirate would be spent sort of hanging around on ship. If they had rum on board or some other liquor, they'd probably be drinking. They'd probably be playing cards, playing dice. Maybe they'd tidy up the ship a little bit, but these weren't like Navy swabs who are going to holy stone the deck and make it clean. They were rough and ready guys, and a lot of it was really boring. Sometimes they got into fights.
Yeah, I guess like you said, I mean, you're drinking, you're in the hot sun, you're bored. Maybe you don't see a ship for a week, 2 weeks. I mean,
Yeah.
I can see you're going nuts. And when you do finally you come across that ship, you probably have so much energy now because
Yeah.
hey, there's something to do.
Yep.
Maybe you go gung ho and go grab that. So a lot
Yeah.
of the merchant ships, you're saying, when they see that pirate ship, 80, 100 men, cannons, all the swords drawn, they just say, "Whoa, whoa, take my ship." I don't even like.
Yeah.
Do they go without a shot fired?
Yes. I mean, because the owners weren't on board usually, it was hired men, and they know they have no chance. But
Right.
there were some merchant ships, especially East India trading ships, that were larger and heavily fortified, had a lot of cannons. There were a number of interactions between pirates and armed ships that sometimes the pirates lost. So it really depended on the ship that they came upon. If they were coming upon a large merchant ship that had maybe 50 men on board and had 10 cannons, then that's very different from coming across a merchant ship that's not as big, that maybe has 10 people on board and has a couple of cannons, maybe, or some rail guns, or maybe some muskets. So it really depends. And when they come upon each other, a lot of times the pirates would use a ruse false flag. So
Yeah.
they wouldn't run their Jolly Roger up there. If they thought the ship that they saw out in the distance was British, they'd put the Union Jack on their mainmast.
Yeah.
Or if they thought it was French, they'd put the French flag, or Dutch. And then once they got closer, suddenly the fake flag would come down, the Jolly Roger would go up, and it was too late for the other ship to flee. So they had to decide whether to fight or surrender. Most of them surrendered.
I'm sure. It was actually one of my fun little trivia questions of the phrase "show your true colors" stemmed from the age of piracy. They would do just that. They'd come at you with your home country's flag, so you think it's friend, and then when it got close enough, zoop, 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 up goes the skull and crossbones or whatever you're flying, and they know it's they got big trouble. How many? Here's a question I like from Brian Savage. I'm sorry, the text is small. How many pirate captains survived to return to somewhat of a normal life? So many of them died and got caught, but did some make that transition back to civilian life?
I'm sure some did. This is where the record is almost silent. One of the strange things, or perhaps not so strange, there is not a single pirate who came back from his pirating and wrote a memoir. or published their journal. They were doing something illegal. They didn't want to bring attention upon themselves. So as a result, we got no direct data from them once they made it back to land and survived their pirating career, unless they were captured and put on trial. And then we heard a lot about them. But I have no doubt that there were enough pirates that survived that they must have come back to either where they came from or someplace else, like Blackbeard. Blackbeard had 400 men with him. They sort of dispersed at the end in this very complicated, there was a dance between him and another pirate and what they were going to do with the money. And a lot of Blackbeard's men sort of melted away. They went up to Virginia. Some of them were captured while they were going across the countryside. But there's no doubt, given the numbers involved, that a significant number of Blackbeard's men melted into the populace and were never brought up on charges. But we have absolutely no information about what they did, whether they changed their name, whether they went back to their home community and were welcomed because they were related to people there. We just know almost nothing about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That does make sense. Here's a question from Sue Ramsey, and I'll expand on it a little bit too. She asked, "What about Anne Bonny? And what about female pirates or privateers in general? Were there notable ones, and did they actively go out and fight, or were they sort of in a different role?"
Well, Anne Bonny and Mary Read are sort of like unicorns. I looked really hard. They are the only known documented female pirates from the Golden Age of Piracy. And if you look at the real information that we have about them, it's basically a couple of pages of a transcript of the trial of Anne Bonny's boyfriend, Calico Jack Rackham, who was hanged in Nassau. Port Royal in Jamaica. And what was it, Nassau? Now I'm totally spacing. Anyway, one of the two. And there's a trial transcript. And in it, it's fascinating because both of those ladies, or pirates, were pregnant. So they were tried, but then they pleaded their bellies, is what it was called. They told the judge, "We're pregnant. You can't hang us." And the judge basically rescinded their death sentence for a while. We don't know what happened to both. One of them sort of died later of illness. The other one, we're not really sure exactly how things ended. But so there's very little information on Anne Bonny and Mary Read. Nevertheless, there have been entire books written about them because so great is the desire to have a female pirate. I would love to have found more female pirates. I would love to have found female privateers. There's one murky record of a female privateer, but I was unable to substantiate it. I would have loved to have found more records of female whalemen. There were a few, and there's one story I tell in the book of this female whaleman who is called Shorty when she lived in the 5 Points section of New York, not with Daniel Day-Lewis, but back then.
What a good movie that was.
A pickpocket and a prostitute, and she basically snuck onto a whaling voyage with her breasts strapped to her chest, and she dressed like a man. And for 7 months, she was undiscovered. But then she got sick, and she went down to the forecastle. She went down to her berth, and had a fever, and a man came in to try to minister to her, maybe the surgeon on board, not clear, but opened up the blouse, saw the wrapping, and literally saw this man in a new light. It was a woman, and they
Wow.
dropped her off with the minister in Peru, the American diplomat in Peru, and she ultimately made her way back to New York. But that, of all the stories, that's the only one we had a lot of information. And this one very assiduous researcher looked through all the logbooks and estimated that 1 out of every 1,000 whaling voyages had a woman on board that was acting as a man. But getting
Really?
back to pirates, I wish there were more female pirates. I told you I'm looking for a new book. If I found credible evidence of another female pirate, I don't care if we only had 2 sentences on that person. I'd write a book on it because I know everybody would buy it.
Wow. Well, hey, listen, in the chat,
Pirates.
so there's some pirate fans in the chat. If you know of a female pirate story, I'll put Eric's email in the description. Email him.
There's a female. You mentioned it at the outset. There's a very famous pirate kingpin in China. I can't remember her name. You mentioned it before. I don't write about her in my book, but she was really, just like a lot of Asian women, Chinese women ran brothels and flower ships, which were floating brothels. She managed to amass a huge fleet of pirates. And talk about vicious pirates. The stories I've read about Chinese pirates in the 1600s and 1700s, they were vicious.
Wow, really?
Yes.
Well, let me see. I'm going through some of my questions here. It's getting late. Here's one. Who were the key figures in bringing the pirate era to an end? Like you said, even though it still kind of goes on, there was a definitive line where it became so unpopular that it subsided somewhat. Who were the notable people in America that helped kind of bring it to an end?
Well, a lot of colonial governors sent out military ships to attack the pirates and kill them or bring them in for trial. So there were a lot more trials up and down the coast. A lot of pirates were hanged. There were pardons that were issued by the king. And many pirates took advantage of those pardons to have their record wiped clean. But the one thing that really was the death knell for the pirates was when Woodes Rogers, a British sailor and captain, went over to Nassau in the Bahamas with a fairly sizable fleet and basically took over this pirate retreat and held trials and essentially put an end to that. And once pirates couldn't use Nassau as a place to regroup, revictual, have some entertainment, they really were out of luck. And then piracy just became like dime store pirates. I mean, like snatch and grabs on land. It was it wasn't historic. And so that's really what happened, how it died. And there was something I saw in the comments I wanted to make a comment about, but I totally...
Ed, if you want to scroll through, I have a photo up.
Yeah. The Dread Pirate Roberts, my favorite pirate.
Oh, go ahead.
Princess Bride so many times, but there's a shred of truth. Dread Pirate Roberts, if you remember the movie, The Princess Bride, when Carrie Elwes, or Wesley, I think his name was, when he basically tells the guy that says, I am Inigo Montoya, and you killed my father.
Yeah.
The actor, Mandy Patinkin.
He
says, listen, you're unemployed now. Do you want to become the Dread Pirate Roberts? And he tells him as a secret. He goes, it's just the name. Back in the day, the Dread Pirate Roberts did some bad things, just like Blackbeard maybe did some bad things. And the name is so fear-invoking that you can become the Dread Pirate Roberts and go have a good life pirating out in the ocean and making money. I love that movie.
That was good. Mandy Patinkin played great, and Andre the Giant. I'm a big wrestling fan. Andre the Giant.
He would have been a great pirate.
Oh my god, yeah. You don't want to mess with him. Oh, here's a funny one from Eric Fairchild. It says, "Dime store pirates, my new favorite term." I do like that one. Let me say, I got a couple more, and anybody questions? I'm going to try to wrap this up in 15 minutes. I've taken a lot of his time.
Okay.
Which pirate, Eric, in history do you think, in your opinion, would make the best modern day CEO? Like, who is a good leader of men?
Oh, there have been some books written about that I haven't read. There was a book on leadership qualities to learn from pirates or something like that. I didn't read it, so maybe if I did, I'd have a better answer. But Blackbeard is often actually promoted by people I've seen as he might have been a good CEO because he must have been a good leader of men to have corralled 400 men to follow his lead, even though he wasn't that successful. So I would say of all the pirates that we know something about, it seems like must have been pretty good. Also, Henry Avery, with the pirate who got away during the Golden Age of Piracy in the 1690s. He is actually one of the few pirates that captured Mughal ships with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of money and jewels on board, and then faded off screen and survived. Nobody knows what happened to him. They wrote an entire play about him that played in Drury Lane in London called, I think it's a Successful Pirate. They made up stories about him. They said, well, he married the emperor, the emperor's daughter, and he created a little retreat in Madagascar. I mean, none of that's true. But the odds are, from what we know, he escaped justice. There was a worldwide manhunt for him because basically what those pirates in the Indian Ocean did is they were attacking Mughal shipping. The Mughal Empire was one of the main sources of money for the British East India Company. The British East India Company was one of the most powerful entities in England and provided a lot of the annual income to the treasury. So when the pirates were attacking the Mughal ships, the emperor said, screw you, Britain, no more trade. And they cut off trade and actually imprisoned British merchants who were in India at the time. So Britain had a great incentive to go wipe the seas clean of these pirates because they were horning in on their good business venture.
Wow.
So it's a great story.
There was a comment in here from a good friend of mine who detects up your way in Massachusetts, where a buddy of his found an 8 real cob that he thinks he tracked back to one of Avery's ships. I'll have to ask him how that provenance came about, but like you asked in the pre-show, you don't know a lot about metal detecting. And he said, hey, I watched some of your videos, Jay. Is that stuff real? Because if you don't know, you don't know. But I'm telling you, you go out and do it. If you live on the East Coast, colonial part of America,
right,
you find some amazing things. It's very possible that it could have found something off of his ship. But I'll have to get more information from him.
I see here, one of these questions is funny. Somebody said, is Captain Kidd's treasure in Lynn Woods? No.
It's not there?
Here, there's a rock. What is the name of the rock? Marble? No, the Marble family. Oh, this is horrible. I should have reread my book. But in Lynn Woods, there is a huge rock, a monolith of rock that has a hole drilled in it that goes down about 20 feet, Dungeon Rock. Okay. And the story is in the 1650s, a pirate named Veal came into the Swampscott area, Lynn Swampscott line, took his treasure, hiked into what is now the Lynn Woods, and buried it at the bottom of Dungeon Rock. Now, if you've ever been to Dungeon Rock, which I have, you climb down. It is what? It is a rock. It is a solid rock. How could a pirate lift up a 3 million ton rock and put a treasure under it? And if you go down into the hole, which the Marble family dug, by the way, no Captain Veal, you reach a dead end in some water and it's solid rock all around you. But in the 1850s, this family they spent years digging for this treasure, and there were articles in major newspapers about how they were on, what they were just like the 18th, 19th century version of that, of the, what's the show you mentioned in Nova Scotia?
Oak Island.
Oak Island. Yeah. They were the precursor to Oak Island. They spent a lot of money, a lot of years. They generated a lot of public interest. I think they even made some money giving tours and doing other stuff. And in the end, they found SWAT.
Yeah, it happens a lot. Hey, but sometimes the thrill is in the adventure, and
Right.
it doesn't always come to fruition.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I would love to. Now you got me interested in my house. As I mentioned,
um,
the house I live in is 1753, so it's pretty old. But Marblehead's very old. So now
I
I
know.
would love to find a coin. That
I'm
would
gonna
be
next time I come up a couple times a year. When I come up,
okay.
I'm gonna email you. I'm
Okay.
gonna bring a
Okay.
machine.
Okay.
You're gonna enjoy it. How about here's one. In your research from all your pirates and privateers, have you encountered a story or a person that after you researched them completely changed your understanding of how that person is portrayed in modern day times?
Hmm. Well, sort of generically, privateers. When I started looking at privateers, everybody was telling me, and all the stuff I was reading is that they were just pirates that were only in it for the money. And as a result of writing my book, Rebels at Sea, I discovered through their own words and more so their actions that they were just as patriotic as the next guy. And if you start digging deeply, a lot of our continental soldiers were in it for the money as much as they were in it for the patriotism. Because as George Washington said very perceptively, you're not going to get anybody to fight if he doesn't have any potential of pecuniary or financial gain. But hopefully, there's also a civic virtue element of it or patriotism. So that's one group that I look more favorably upon than their own peers did back in the 1700s, because a lot of the founding fathers looked down on privateering. And that's why the story is not told a lot in the history books, because the people that wrote the history of the American Revolution were by and large founding fathers, educated elites who looked down on privateering. So why would they have singled it out as being important? They wanted to forget about it. And as I mentioned, just like pirates wrote no memoirs, privateers wrote just a handful of memoirs. And luckily, I was able to use some of those. In terms of pirates, I guess Blackbeard. I'm sorry to keep going to Blackbeard and
No, no.
Captain Kidd. My knowledge of Blackbeard and Captain Kidd when I started working on the books was that Blackbeard was this fearsome, really successful, archetype of a pirate, and Captain Kidd was a ruthless pirate as well. Well, Blackbeard may have been the archetype for pirates, but he wasn't a very successful pirate, and Captain Kidd was even less successful. But his story is very interesting. Both of them are very interesting.
Yeah, they're like some of the most iconic ones. Or if you say pirate, that's the name most people would think of.
Oh
And
yeah.
it turns out, for being a pirate, they were kind of disappointing.
Yeah. Well, Blackbeard's a great name. You couldn't have picked a
No,
better
no.
name than Blackbeard. And somebody in your comments said they live near Blackbeard where he used to live. Now, there is a house down there in North Carolina that claims to be Blackbeard's house. There's no record he ever had a house, and I doubt he did. There's also a story that he had 14 wives, and that comes from Charles Johnson's History of the Pirates, and that he used to dole them out to his men as prostitutes. Total BS.
Oh,
Uh,
no good, no good.
Now
But
I don't begrudge. Maybe the reason nobody from North Carolina has ever invited me to speak. When I after this book came out, I went various places and places would pay to have me come speak. Nobody from North Carolina reached out. Maybe because if you read my book, I sort of downplay some of the myths because
yeah,
they've made a entire mini cottage industry in North Carolina out of Blackbeard. And I don't begrudge them at all, but don't try to peddle something as fact when it's fiction. It could be just as fun, just as meaningful. It's just like if you go to Nassau, you'll see Blackbeard's, I think, castle. I've never been there, his castle, and there are guys walking around dressed as Blackbeard. And, he may have spent a couple of days or weeks there, but there was never a castle or a major city in Nassau in the Bahamas. And Black Sails, that's another. Black Sails did more for pirates, did as much for pirates as the Pirates of the Caribbean. I never played. I guess Black Sails is a game. My son, I think, played it, but it was a TV show. I only saw one or two episodes. It was great fun, but I can guarantee you that in the 17 teens, Nassau never looked like that. It was never that
yeah.
organized, that many nice buildings, those suave, good looking pirates. They probably were all pretty
Yeah.
scary looking
Yeah.
and really in tattered clothes. And, but it's great. I think it's great that there are all these shows like
Yeah,
that.
we do really romanticize pirates, like you said, and they've become these like the motorcycle gangs of the sea. Like tough guys, bad to the bone guys. Don't mess with them. And then when you see shows like that, or Pirates of the Caribbean, like they're also incredibly handsome and
Yeah.
debonair, and it's kind of funny how they're portrayed.
Yeah.
Um, how about of all the pirates that you've written about, is there any that if you could sit down and talk to in person, if you have a little time machine? Who do you find the most intriguing that you would love to pick their brain for an afternoon?
Um,
And you might go back to Blackbeard again. I know you do like him.
I'd like to speak to Stede Bonnet. Stede Bonnet was in league with Blackbeard for a while, and then he was on his own. The reason I like to speak with him is he had a very unusual background. He was a sugar plantation owner in Barbados, a fairly wealthy man who suddenly decided to become a pirate. He built his own 70-foot sloop with his own money. He built a bookcases in the captain's cabin for his books, which he thought he could read during his downtime. And then he took off. And as to why he did this, I'd really like to know. There are different theories. Some people said maybe he became sort of slightly insane. Other people said it's because he had a really bad marriage. And I got to tell you, if you're going to go off pirating, you must have had a really horrible marriage to force you into that line of work. And then there are accounts of him coming on deck dressed in his fancy clothes, and he wasn't much of a pirate king, and Blackbeard sort of manipulated him a little bit. So I would love to sit down with Stede Bonnet and ask him, why did you do it? And tell me a little bit more about your experience. He ended up at the end of a rope in Charleston Harbor later on in his short career. I'd like to talk to Blackbeard too, only because I'd like to tell him, you're really famous.
Yeah. Do you know how famous you are?
Yeah, it's sort of like Van Gogh. Van Gogh during his lifetime, or Van Gogh, as he's supposed to say, during his lifetime, he had a miserable life as an artist. He was not famous. He dies later. He becomes one of those famous painters. Herman Melville was a failure as a writer during most of his life. When he wrote Moby Dick, he thought it was going to launch him into the heights of literary stardom. The book sold fewer than 5,000 copies. He made almost no money on it. And when he died in 1891, Herman Melville's obituary in Harper's Weekly was one sentence long. But now he's considered probably the greatest American novelist of all time, right up there with Mark Twain and others. So I would love to talk to those guys too, mainly because I'd like to say, are you pissed?
Yeah. I know it's not a consolation. It's no consolation, but after you're dead, you're going to
a little bit of fame and success would enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a shame. You never know. I didn't know that Melville didn't get famous till after he was died, because to me that's a classic.
He was famous a little bit in the 1840s because he wrote two books, one called Typee, one called Umu, about his experiences as a whaleman, and he jumped ship in the Pacific Ocean. Those books did pretty well, but it was really Moby Dick, or the White Whale, that he thought was going to be his magnum opus. His buddy Nathaniel Hawthorne was already much more famous than he was. And I think Moby Dick's a great book. It's a wild book. It's a crazy book, especially for the 1850s when it came out. And I just think people couldn't handle all this psychological stuff in it, the wild writing style. He had a way with words, and it just didn't hit right. And he ended up, being like, that's why he wrote Bartleby the Scrivener. I mean, he ended up being a clerk, and not a very successful one at that. So it's kind of a shame.
Yeah. All right, listen, I'm going to do like two more questions, guys, and then I'm going to try to get him out of here. Here's one I do see from Liberty. Where'd it go? Liberty Road Relics. Another good pirate story from Marblehead, the story of Whaling Beach. I'm sure you must know something about that.
Yes. So I like your Indian head scent. I used to collect coins. I didn't find them, but I used to collect them. But yes, the Whaling Beach. It's right. It's about a 3-minute walk from my house. It's apparently a beach which let me get it right. I think it was in the early 1700s. Some pirates had captured a ship offshore. On the ship was a woman who had a very nice ring on her finger. They brought her to this beach. They couldn't get the ring off her finger, so they cut off her hand or her finger, depending on which story you believe, and she screamed, and apparently everybody in town could hear it. The only problem with the story is there's no contemporary corroboration that this actually happened. I tend to think it didn't happen, because why would the pirates come ashore, first of all, to cut off her ring finger? It's a great story. People tell it here a lot. I have no reason, I have no information that would lead me to believe that it actually happened, but it's a great story. I've told it before in one form or another. And don't let truth get in the way of a good story, as they say. But again, don't go to Hollywood for your history, but you can go there for your entertainment.
I agree. I'll tell you, my little pirate story that I have, which I know is hogwash, but it was fun to immerse myself in. Last year, when we were digging up in Cape Cod, I found this this little metal tag. It's probably I dated it based on the script and everything from probably like a 1840 or so, and it had a name etched in it that said Chaz Hallett, Hallett.
Oh, Chaz
And
Hallett.
and in looking through who Chaz Hallett was, which was actually short for Charles, they just
Yes.
shortened it to Chaz. There was some allusion that he may have been related to Goody Hallett, who was part of the famed lore that she was Sam Bellamy's mistress or girlfriend or something like that.
Right.
Now, I don't even know if Goody Hallett was a real person. I don't know.
No,
if
she was.
Was she really? She
wasn't Goody. What was her first name? Wait a second. Now I'm totally spacing. Yes, no, she's a real person, a real family, the Hallett family.
I know the Hallett family.
There's no that story is repeated a lot. I couldn't find any source that said this is true, and there's nothing in the trial transcript that talks about, because the story is always told that the reason that the widow
Eric, I think you locked up on me there for a second. Hold on, you're frozen. Okay, you're back. You're back.
And he was going back to Cape Cod to pick up the love of his life.
Yes.
There was not a single mention by any of his pirates who survived the crash and were later put on trial that, yeah, we were going to Cape Cod to get Sam Bellamy's squeeze, his girlfriend. Nothing. So I don't think that's true, but it's a great story and people repeat it all the time. And Barry Clifford repeats it, and it's at the Wida Pirate Museum. They treat it as fact. Hey, I'd love to be proven wrong. It'd be great if these romantic stories were true, because it'd be even more exciting. But
I thought it was cool. I didn't have any belief that my thing had anything to do with Goody Hallett, but I did donate it to the Barnstable Historical Society because they have a little curated thing of the whole mystique. So I'll add to that because hey, why not? You need some good fantasy stories like that.
Somebody said, Corn Smoke said, what about Captain Hook? Well, Captain Hook's a great movie character, and there is some evidence there. Back at this time, there were people who lost their hands, lower arms, who had prosthetics that could be hooks. So that's real. I bet if you could go back and survey every single pirate, you probably find one who had a hook, some kind of hook or a prosthetic for a hand. I didn't come across any information about that, and I don't think he was still on board. But it's a great story. Dustin Hoffman was Captain Hook. Who else was Captain Hook?
There was,
and that was the one with Robin Williams in it.
Yeah, with Robin Williams in it. And I mean, listen, if you're going to get a prosthetic hand, Eric, why would you want a hook? Like, that's not really the most practical prosthetic shape, is it?
Yeah, it's I don't know,
but it makes for a good thing here. I'm sorry. Was there another? I'm looking to see. All right, guys, I'm going to get out of here. Another minute. You got 1 minute. Any last questions? I'm going to try to keep an eye out. Last question for Eric before I cut him loose. My last question for you, which you covered earlier, was, what's next for you? And I know you said that you're still looking for that next story that captivates you. So if anyone has any good ideas, and I'll share a little thing with you, Eric, and this is going to be very unlikely, but you never know. I've been in contact the last couple of days I've been trying to get Ken Burns to come on the show. You know, Ken Burns. He has a new show coming out.
American Revolution.
Yes. And I thought, what a good promotion. You know, we're all over that. So I'm trying to get, I mean, there's a chance he might come on.
He's a
And,
big shot. It's pretty hard to get him, I
well,
think.
that's the thing. I mean, I'm small potatoes for that. But when you're on a promotional tour, it's good to
Yeah.
like come down with the people, you know. But if
Yes.
he does, I've noticed that Ken Burns never done anything with pirates. So if I can get him on, I'm going to drop your name and the theme of pirates. So who knows?
Okay. Yeah,
Maybe
sure.
something will
No,
come with that. Eric Fairchild said Port Royal stories. Any stories from Port Royal? I don't even know what that means. Is
Port
Port
Royal,
Royal?
Jamaica was a hotbed of buccaneering
Oh,
and piracy in the 1650s. Basically, Port Royal was an outpost of the British Empire, but they had a colonial governor there, but they had very little in the way of any defense, soldiers. So Port Royal at one time was a place where a lot of the pirates went. It was a pirates' haunt. This is well documented. There were brothels there. There were pubs. People were getting drunk all the time. There were fights, but it got to be a little bit out of hand. And one of the reasons that Henry Morgan gained some fame is that he and other buccaneers finally, at the behest of the colonial governor, sort of became a militia for the governor to protect him not only from unruly pirates, but also the Spanish who had set their sights on Jamaica. So, in a very interesting way, pirates is sort of like Hell's Angels protecting
yeah.
musicians in the 60s, I guess. I don't know. That's not a good analogy because there were a lot of bad things happened back then. But probably bad things happened in Port Royal. But the colonial governor basically he basically said, I'll overlook what you pirates are doing out there if you will essentially be my thugs and keeping the Spanish away from Port Royal. So there was a very interesting relation, but there are some great quotes in the book. I can't remember them off the top of my head about fights that pirates would have in Port Royal, about prostitutes. There was this one prostitute. What was her name? She said she was like a barbershop chair. As soon as one guy got up, another guy sat down, and it
Oh
was
my
just a
goodness.
rotating. But it was put a lot better than that. And so there were some there were just it was a fascinating Port Royal, and there's some good books on it. Port Royal, Jamaica in the 1650s and 60s must have been a really
Yeah.
wild place. It was considered the Sodom and Gomorrah of the Western world. It was looked upon with horror by religious people all around the world. And it finally, when the earthquake hit Port Royal in the late 1600s, many people said that it was God's punishment against these immoral, lascivious people who hung out in Port Royal, most of which were pirates.
Wow. That sounds like a fun place to go visit for a day, actually.
Oh yeah, sure.
How about there's a lot of questions about, here's one I'll bring up. A lot of questions about hygiene on a ship. I mean, you hear things about like scurvy and different things. I mean, before a ship went out for, weeks or months, did they do a general health check of the crew to make sure that someone wasn't going to spread
No, no, no.
smallpox or anything like
No,
that? So
no. I
nothing.
mean, they may have dropped people off if they got sick and started spreading. They would maroon guys who were really sick. Sometimes there's some evidence of that, but a lot of pirates started off small with small boats, and then they worked their way up and they gathered crew as they went along. But again, I'm focusing on the Pirates of the Caribbean era, the 17 teens and 1720s. It wasn't like a privateering vessel, or it wasn't like a Red Sea pirate. They didn't say, there weren't a bunch of guys in a local tavern in Newport saying, aha, let's become pirates. Let's go down to the wharf and buy ourselves a ship. And then we'll go to the commissary and we'll buy provisions. That's not how they started out. They started by stealing a small boat, attacking some ship, doing something, and then they got most of their goods and food and liquor by taking over ships and taking their cargo. That's a lot of the ways that they kept going. Or sometimes they would go ashore in a more desolate area and they would gather supplies or water or something else. But the pirates during Blackbeard's era and Sam Bellamy, they were not pulling into New York. They were not pulling into Newport. They were not pulling into Boston. They were persona non grata. So they had to make do with what they could find on the waves or down in Nassau, or maybe some other smaller communities where they could land and muscle their way to get what they want.
Wow. Well, listen, Eric, I told you an hour. We've been almost an
Yeah.
hour and
My
45
dinner's
minutes.
downstairs waiting for me.
I know mine is too. Mine is too. I want to let you out of here. I
Okay.
can't thank you enough for spending the
For
night with
sure.
me.
No
And
problem.
guys, like Teresa's putting it in there. I have links in the description too to Eric's website, all his books that are on Amazon. Like I said,
Yeah.
we covered a lot of his books today, mostly a lot of the pirates of his
Right.
famed Black Flags, Blue Waters book,
Yeah.
and also his book Rebels at Sea, which was his most recent one.
Right.
And he's going to have the new one out. It was called the new one,
Wreck of the Mentor.
Wreck of the Mentor, which will be
Yeah. If
coming out.
anybody, if anybody, you probably put it in your whatever your information. And somebody I saw was very nice to put it in their comments. I do have a website. It's basically just my whole name, ericjdolin.com. If you go
Yes.
there, yes, I'm promoting myself, but if you go there, two things. You can read the introductory chapters to all of my books, including Black Flags, Blue Waters. So you can read an introductory chapter and say, I'd like to read this. I wouldn't like to read this. There are also links to buying it, but I'll make a special plea. My book, Wreck of the Mentor, comes out in June. It's not about pirates. It's not about detectoring, but it's a great book. And if you have any inclination to pre-order, it helps me succeed as an author. Believe it or not, what's happened to publishing over the years is it used to be you could publish a book and you could have a couple of months to sort of gain traction. As with everything in the world, social media, now a book comes out, and if it doesn't start picking up like a lot of sales in the first week or two, that's it. The publisher's on to the next book.
Yeah.
It can still do good over time. But I mean, my pirate book still sells a lot of books every year. So that one sort of caught on. But now I was just told by my editor that they're really focusing on pre-orders, which I never even used to think about. But it's like gaming the system. So anyway, forget about my new book. If you're interested in pirates, which maybe is what brought you to this, or Rebels at Sea, those books are for sale and they're really cheap.
Well, they are, and they're available in audiobook also. But like Eric said,
yes.
If you like Eric, he's a fantastic storyteller. His new book's going to come out in July. Hey, if you're thinking about it, go pre-order. He's giving you a little sample. You'll kind of see if you like it. Wreck of the Mentor, and who knows when that comes out? I might ask him to come back on again, or maybe you'll see Eric in one of my Tuesday videos, metal detecting somewhere up in Marblehead. Who knows? But Eric, thank you very much, man. I can't thank you enough for coming on. Tell your wife I apologize for keeping you late, and go enjoy yourself a nice hot dinner, my friend.
Okay, thank you, and thanks to everybody for watching.
All right, take care, brother.
Take care.
Right,
Bye-bye.
bye. Well, there you go, guys. How about that? A nice day about pirates. I thought he was super cool. And I didn't really talk about his background too. Well, I did a little bit. He told you he's got a PhD. But his educational background, if you look him up, he's got a Wikipedia page, Eric. He got his bachelor's degree from Brown University, super prestigious. He got his master's from Yale, super prestigious, and he got his PhD from MIT. That's a super brainiac guy. So he knows how to research. Really intelligent guy. Really enjoyed him coming on. So thank him very much, Eric Jay Dolin, and Teresa for putting up all his links. I really appreciate it. Next week, we'll be back with a regular recap show, which I was trying to do last week. Didn't work out. So next week, the whole gang should be on, barring no emergencies. We'll be going over the last couple of videos because shameless self-promotion. If you didn't see my Tuesday video that just came out, possibly the rarest coin we've ever found. I mean, at least in the last couple of years. So go check that out. You're really going to like it. And who knows? Eric seems pretty gung ho. I would love to go hunt with him up in Marblehead. We do go up there a lot, so that would be a lot of fun. So looking forward to that. But I'll say a couple of last hellos in the chat before I get out of here. I do want to thank the moderators, Teresa, the treasure hunter, of course, Alicia, Hot Mess Fishing, and Chris Wicked Digger, who made it in for a while tonight. I appreciate it, Chris. Oh, and Dog Tag Doug just popped in too. Doug would have been here. He had some sort of a tooth issue. I hope you're okay, Dougie. I'll call you tomorrow about that. But everybody who came in, Relic Dog, Ren 4099, Esco, NEPA History and Archaeology Search, Cody Lovelace, Trala Diggs. I hope I didn't forget anybody. Sue Ramsey. Sue said, what am I going to be for Halloween? Probably nothing, Sue. I'm getting a little old for that. But I do love handing out candy to the little guys. So my wife and I usually set up on the front stoop, and we'll hopefully get a lot of the little kids coming up dressed up. We'll see. Seems like there's less and less every year. I just think kids might be losing interest or whatever, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So anyway, I'm going to wrap the whole show up for the night. So, oh wait, hold on, Jason, what happened to your beard? Did you slip with the raid? That's exactly what I did. It's exactly what I did. I'm left-handed, and when I shave in the mirror in the in the shower and it's all steamed up, sometimes you miss, so it gets like a little crooked. There you go. Now it's fixed. So in a week or so, it'll be straight again. Where'd I go? All right, but I'm going to get out of here, guys. I'm really tired. I didn't eat dinner either, and I'm going to go downstairs and have a meal. So, hey, thank you all for joining me all night. Happy hunting, and we'll see you next week for another live show. Later. All right. I think